Hello and welcome back to the Craft Mansion. I'm David, and in today's video I will be making 3 wands from the Harry Potter movies. Of course, there's no better trio to start with than Aragorn, Gimli and Legolas. Kevin, Joe and Nick Jonas. Tony, Steve and Thor. Luke, Leia and Han. None of these are wizards, and they don't have wands. Now, what iconic trio are wizards and have wands? And one of them broke a wand. Oh, that's right, Justin, Alex and Max Russo. Come on, wizards from the Harry Potter movies. There's Hermione, Ron and the last one. Oh, Harry, that's right. My first proper tutorial on this channel was actually how I made my own wand from the Pottermore site. Is it Pottermore or Pottermore? Anyways, so now I think it's high time that I started actual ones from the movies. Because, you know, it's not as if anyone has ever done that before. To make my wand I used fiberboard. But the ones from the movies, well, Harry's, Hermione's and Ron's, are actually quite thin. So I think I will start with a dowel. So to start off, I printed these templates. Well, I just printed the ones to the correct size. For example, the Hermione wand I bought from the studios is actually about 15 inches long. In the movies they were a bit longer, but I think I will go with the length that's in the books. I started with Hermione's wand. I decided to build my wands from wooden dowels and build upon the dowel core. To measure the thickness of the core, I didn't need the pattern of the vines, so I cut those away from the sides to have a straight edge. For this wand, I used a dowel 8mm in diameter and cut it to the right length. I cut into the wood using my knife, turning the dowel around until it snapped. Then I sanded off the end to make it smooth. Now of course the wand is thinner at the end, so I traced the thickness with a pencil. This is why I cut off the vines pattern, to have a straight edge which I could trace. Then I started hacking away the excess wood. I continued rounding the dowel, cause sometimes I did end up with more of a square structure. For a more refined look, I used a Dremel tool and flattened the remaining edges. For that final smoothness, I used a sandpaper, cause the Dremel bit was still too rough for a final product. For the vine pattern, I decided to go with the method of adding it after I finished the wand core, instead of carving it straight from the wood. So I marked what could be seen from the template to first form the pattern on the wood itself. Then, I continued the pattern all the way around the wood. The only problem was, how was I going to transfer the pattern onto paper? So I started by filling in the pattern, making sure to leave plenty of graphite on the wood. Then, I covered all of the pattern with masking tape, all the way around the wood and pressing it hard. I carefully peeled it off, and as you can see the pattern has transferred onto the tape. I cut a strip of paper and then stuck the tape onto it. It was quite visible, but I needed the pattern to be sharper, so I went over it with a marker. The pattern needs to be transferred into a continuous template. So first, I taped one edge of the strip. Then I cut one layer at a time, and each time I taped the cut layer to the next one. I also left a little gap between each layer to lengthen the overall pattern. Once I had all the pieces together, I cut out the entire pattern. I transferred the pattern onto cardboard. This is why I lengthened the pattern, because since cardboard is thicker, it makes for wider loops around the dowel. And then I cut it. Using super glue, I glued the pattern in its place, using the markings on the dowel as a guide. I glued the main vine first, and then the leaves that come out of it. Finally, I sealed the whole wand with Mod Podge. To make Ron's wand, I started with a dowel 1 cm in diameter. This is Ron's first wand, the one he breaks in the second movie. I measured its length and cut it. Now this dowel is thicker and stronger than the other one, so I cut as deep as I could and snapped it the rest of the way. I removed the splinters on the edge and then sanded them smooth. I marked the thickness and cut off the excess wood. This wand needed to be the smoothest one, as there's no pattern on it to hide imperfections, and also the original wand is quite smooth as well. For the final touch, I sanded it with sandpaper. Smells like pancakes. I marked the 3 lines at the handle of the wand and then hollowed them out. I just remembered that my brother actually has Harry's wand. Of course, this is slightly bigger than the length that's in the books. For the handle, I used fiberboard, which is essentially compressed cardboard, so it's quite easy to cut with a sharp knife. I cut 2 layers, glue them together with wood glue and then clamp them together until the glue had dried. While it was still in the clamps drying, I made a hole 1 cm in diameter for the dowel to fit inside. Before I started working or even cutting the dowel to the right length, I inserted it into the handle and marked the length inside the handle. I aligned the mark with the line on the template that marked the start of the handle, and then marked the length of the dowel needed. I copied the thickness, taking extra care to mark the thicker and thinner parts of the wand. The difference in thickness is marked by this slanting line. I cut bit by bit and rounded the wand. The thinner part is quite finely rounded, so I went over it a few times. But the thicker part needs to have a clear shape of carved wood, so I only used a nail file to smoothen out some edges. Once the fiberboard had dried, I fit the dowel inside of it. Unfortunately, it split open from some areas and glue escaped, so I had to apply glue to those areas again and reclamp the whole thing. I left it for about an hour drying and then marked its proper thickness to start carving. Fiberboard is made out of layers, so from two opposing sides, it's very easy to carve. I shaped and rounded the handle, cutting round the design I drew from the template. Sometimes fiberboard also breaks off layers by mistake. When that happened, I glued the pieces back on. Along the general smooth shape of the handle, there are two propped up circles, like the beginning of a branch but cut off. There's one on each side. The pattern on the handle splits into three parts. The two ends are quite rough and thick, and between them is a thin part with streaks along its length. So I marked the borders and carved them out. I gave it a very quick sanding but still kept the handle rough. I marked the areas I needed to carve out and then roughened them out quite a bit. It does resemble a natural log after all. Then I cut the lines along the middle part, constantly brushing off the excess fiberboard. The material is quite stubborn, so to make sure no parts would break off, I sealed the handle with Mod Podge twice. I sanded each coat lightly after they had dried. You'll see those clips at the top of the wands. That's just so I could hang them to dry. If you do use this method, stick a little folded tissue or something soft between the clip and the wand, just so not to make an indent in the wood. Harry's wand has two main colors, brown for the dowel part and then really dark brown for the handle. I dry brushed some gold to the handle to give it a little shine and to highlight some areas. I also darkened some areas like this one over here. Hermione's has a similar brown to that of Harry's. Then I also dry brushed some gold, especially to highlight the edges of the pattern and make it stand out more. Ron's wand is very light. It's actually lighter than this. I do arrange it later on, but I'm not that good when it comes to light wood colors. The tree rings are darker, so I painted them with very dark brown. To give the paint a more natural look, I dry brushed some gold and brown. So the three wands are drying over there, and I realized I have more time before I edit this video and post it. So I want to do the other wand. Now I've already started the process. As you can see, I've already marked the thickness of the wand, but then I realized that this dowel is too thick. So I have the thickness of the dowel that I made. So I have the thickness of the dowel that I used for Hermione's wand, and I'm going to use it for the elder wand as well. Of course, I need to cut the dowel. I copied the template again onto the 8mm dowel, but I didn't go around the circular parts. I cut the lines straight, not unlike what I did for Hermione's wand. It's the fourth wand, I think you got the steps by now. The elder wand is quite rough, so I left most of the carving visible. I marked the areas that needed to be thicker than the dowel. And for that, I used clay. This is our drying clay. I constantly kept my hands moist with water and worked the clay quite a lot before applying it. I started with the smallest bit and moved upwards. With each part, I blended the clay into the wood, using water and pushing down with my fingers along the length of the dowel. The first three are quite simple and smooth, but I followed the pattern closely because not all round parts blend down smoothly. The last three end quite abruptly from the side facing the handle, and they are all connected with clay. There's no bare wood. In fact, I flattened a layer of clay and applied it around the dowel. So the fourth part is connected to both wood and clay. I constantly checked with the pattern for measurements and accuracy. The fifth part is the thickest, so I applied a thick layer of clay, and when I realized it was too small, I made it thicker and continued blending it down to the main body of the wand. Water really helps in making everything whole and smooth. The same happened with the last part here. It was too thin, so I added another layer of clay and blended it. Then of course, all the indents in the clay. I made this pattern using a round embossing tool. The smaller parts had already started drying and cracked a bit, but I simply flattened the ends back to the dowel. And it's focusing on the cutting mat. Great. At the ends, I also sort of dragged the embossing tool from the clay to the dowel to create a small streak linking the clay to the wood. Between the fourth and fifth parts, there's an engraved pattern, which I made using a very thin embossing tool. I printed that pattern and copied it all the way around. These last two parts had lots of clay on them, and they were still quite soft, so the clay would end up sticking to the tool. So before each hole, I dipped the tool end in water. This goes on to cover until the engraved pattern, and then to the other side, leading to the last rounded part. The other one's almost finished, there's still some work on the pommel left, so I left it to dry back here, and then I can finish the pommel because it needs to harden a bit before I continue carving into it. Again, sorry it's focused on the mat, but basically for the pommel, I put a circular piece of clay to it and bended it down to the dowel. Then, I thickened the end and rounded it. The pommel also has these 3 grooves running along it. Some of the clay cracked when dry, as it shrinks, so I filled in those cracks with some soft clay and shaped it with water. When it all had dried, I sanded the clay gently so as to smoothen any imperfections created by the tools or my fingerprints. To prevent anything from breaking easily, I sealed the whole wand with a layer of Mod Podge. This actually turned out pretty nice. The clay adds a lot of weight to the wand, so it has more like a swing to it, even when you wave it around. The Mod Podge also makes it very smooth, but of course I have to paint over it to have the finished product. Then I painted the whole thing with dark brown, making sure to fill all the holes and not leave them white. I need to stop saying holes. The engraved part is black, or rather very dark brown. I painted it using a thin brush and wiped off any mistakes. Then the surrounding area is sort of a shade of cream. To darken the deeper areas, I used washed down paint and then wiped off the excess. Finally, I dry brushed brown over some areas and the elder wand was ready for magic. This isn't what they mean by a wand having surprisingly sushi flexibility. I need to make more props like this. Small. I'm already running out of space on my wall, and these are just a few props that I've made. Now I need to find a way to hang these and make more space for ones for the future. If you would like to see more ones, give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment down below. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Right here I have many more videos, 2 of which are these. And until then, this is Harry's wand, Hermione, Ron's, and Dumbledore's. I'm David, and this is the Craft Nation.